2022 to everyone. It was interesting. I got a text from a CHRO the other day, and the text read this: I hate 2021. I am so glad it's 2022, and let's make the most of it. And so maybe your 2021 was better than that. I sure hope to heck it was. But let's move forward. We've got a great agenda. We've got action-packed stuff here. And we've got an excellent guest that we've been really trying to get on this call for a while. And we're really thrilled that Patrick's schedule finally allowed us to showcase him and Choice Hotels. So let's just continue on, Carrie, with all of our background stuff, the housekeeping before we dive into our guest.
So yeah, I'm working on moving the slides. Keep talking. Just
it's
not cooperating right now.
Well, let me just do this. So folks, if you're new to this call, I'm Kevin Martin. I head up research here at I4CP, and I'm thrilled that I'm partnered, as always, with my colleague, Carrie Naiman, who's a senior research analyst on our team. And you'll be hearing from Carrie and I throughout, but most importantly from Patrick. We want to make you all aware of a series of calls. These are monthly calls we have, but we also have other monthly calls going on. You can see the cadence that's open to the public here. And we were, as we've been doing it for 2 years now, going on 2 years, we've really tried to be a resource that allows this great community of HR to learn from each other during these unparalleled times. For those of you who are not familiar with I4CP, we are purely a research firm, but the reason why we bring together such a strong community is because we're relied upon by organizations around the world to provide them research on best and next practices in human capital. And we are a member network, so there are hundreds of organizations in our network. They have exclusive access to our research, exclusive access to themselves, because we do not work formally with any consultants or vendors. And so the dialogue is very private, it's very contained, and very robust as a result of that. And so if you're not a member, but you're interested in learning about it, please let us know. And then lastly, it's been rated the #1 HR conference for several years, but we've got it coming up in March. We hope that you decide to join us. It'll be in Scottsdale. You can see a smattering the speakers here that include everywhere from the chamber of the EEOC, the chair of the EEOC, to a great class of CHROs, including the CEO of Fortune magazine, Amy Edmondson from Harvard Business School. Just a great group of thought leaders for everyone to learn from. So with that, Carrie, no one's heard your voice yet. We'll introduce Patrick in just a moment, but please say hello to the crew.
Hello to the crew. Good morning, everybody. This is Carrie Naiman. Thank you for joining us. And as Kevin mentioned, I'm part of the research team, and I'm very happy to be here today to co-facilitate this conversation.
Awesome. And our special guest is Patrick Cimerola, the Chief HR Officer of Choice Hotels. Patrick is served on our Chief HR Officer board for many years and was such a valuable member of that. He is just among the very best of the best when it comes to his profession, your profession in HR. Choice has been a longstanding member of I4CP. We greatly appreciate that and our partnership with Choice as well. But Patrick, welcome to our hot seat. Thank you for your schedule finally freeing up and being able to join us today.
No problem. I enjoy being here. Love it.
All right. You're in your offices in Maryland right now, or where are you at?
Yeah, so I'm in my office in Rockville, Maryland. Probably one of a very few people here today, but we're trying to manage through the pandemic like everybody else. So right now we're kind of in an environment where come in if you want, if not, work from home or wherever. But I do better in the office. I've got too many things happening in my house, so it's easier for me to come here.
A lot of us can
nice to have the choice, Patrick. Choice.
Exactly.
See what I did there.
Wow, look who's had her coffee this morning. That's awesome. So Patrick, can you start just by telling people a little bit about yourself? We were talking offline, and but you're celebrating. Is it Saturday? 20 years with Choice?
Yeah, I don't know where the time. I don't know where the time went. I can remember pretty vividly 20 years ago, starting my first day at Choice. Really thought I'd only be here a few years. I had been traveling quite a bit on the road, typical HR operations role, and really just wanted to get off the road and spend time with my children. And here I am 20 years later, 3 CEOs later. It's not how I define myself, but I do really look back, and it's been a great career here at Choice, and love the company, love what we've become. Got a ways to go, still lots to learn, lots to do. But for me, this has just been really a blessing. Been able to raise a family, be an executive, be a father, be a spouse. I try to think about being a spouse and a parent first, and being an executive second. And I think Choice has allowed me to do that. And for that, I'm forever grateful.
That's great. And can you tell people about Choice's business model and, just about the company as a whole?
Yeah. So what's great about Choice is 7,000 plus hotels across the globe, mostly largely franchise, which in the HR world, which is nice about that is it's a manageable employee base. It's a couple thousand employees. We have an impact over hundreds of thousands of employees in a sort of indirect way with our franchisees. What's unique about this company, I always tell people, it's a unique business model. You have 4 primary customers. You have franchisees, consumers, shareholders, and employees. And they don't go in a particular order, but I've been very, very fortunate at the level that I am able to operate at, that I can really work in all 4 of those categories at any given time, whether it's working, understanding our guests, our shareholders, obviously with our board. Now that I'm getting more responsibility for ESG, starting to talk to investors. And then you've got obviously our associates and then our franchisees. So unique business model. I used to say this was a really easy business model. It's changed a lot in the last 10 years. It's got more complex. And so I do enjoy the complexity. And I think that's one thing that's kind of kept me going, gives me my oxygen every day.
There are several people on this call that I know are heads of HR for franchise owned and operated firms, but there's a lot who aren't. And so can you just share with everyone the complexities of dealing with that type of business model, especially when it comes to avoiding co-employment type issues, et cetera?
Yeah, so there's this really bright yellow line that we have to be aware of, and it's really called joint employer. And so we've got to be very careful about how we direct what happens at the hotel level, specifically here in the domestic United States, our domestic business. So we're not able to directly sort of tell our owners how to manage their employees, what policies to put in place. We certainly give guidelines and things to consider. You could argue consultative opportunities. So that's the uniqueness about it. We got to be very careful about things like what benefits to offer people, how to pay employees. But we certainly offer a lot of different, lots of advice. And what we do offer, which I do think is really unique, is a lot of training. And so our training arm is pretty unique. Choice University, we call it. And it's everything from how to run a hotel to how to manage an employee to how to make a bed. And we offer that both online as well as in person in different opportunities throughout the year.
I want to sign my husband up for how to make a bed. Sorry, I guess I've had too much coffee this morning already. I don't know. Patrick, and I don't know if we're ready to dive into this yet, but you mentioned something about starting to get more involved with ESGs. And I know this is something that we as a organization, I4CP organization, have been spending more and more time kind of thinking about and looking at organizations who are focused on this, whose focus on this has increased. So would love to hear more about Choice Hotels' approach to ESGs and some of the challenges that you're working on with respect to that, maybe what you're doing to try to impact those components differently.
Yeah, so again, let me start off with understanding that bright yellow line between us and our owners. That's pretty important when it comes to ESG. Now, that said, we literally just opened up a position for a vice president of ESG, if you will, that reports into me. It just opened up today, actually, this morning. And so we'll be looking for someone to lead that area. And what that person will do is largely work with the organization to really sort of spearhead the multiple, think about it like work stream, whether it's on the E side of things. That's largely sustainability, Carrie. So think about what we can do to influence in our case, energy usage at the property level. Think of it like a brand standard. Okay, it's probably the best way to think about it. And then you obviously have the social side of things. So everything from inclusion and diversity to, you know, sort of the culture of your company. I mean, I think for HR executives, particularly if you're in a publicly held company, this is your microphone in terms of what you're doing in your organization around how you impact your employees. And, you know, I'm on these investor calls now with the CFO. They're asking that question. They're asking around hotels, around think about, you know, your green impact, or what are you doing to impact inclusion and diversity, not just in your operation or your franchise, but also at the hotel level. And then the governance side is pretty simple. It's around your board makeup and how you sort of think about governance at the board level, but that's pretty self-explanatory. But this person is really, you know, to put it in a word or a couple words, they're the brand champion for everything you do in those different work streams. And they have to be able to tell that story, or got to be a great storyteller externally, because that's what investors want to know about. And it's pretty loud and clear.
Are you changing at all, or maybe this is going to be more reliant on this person that you hire and that interaction, but what you actually are reporting to boards, is that shifting?
I mean, what the board wants to know is, one, what are you doing to react to what investors are looking for? So when we think about the major shareholder constituencies, you know, Choice is unique. We've got 3 major shareholders, and then we've got a number of others. But whether you have 1,000 shares or you have 1 million shares, it doesn't matter. It's really about understanding what, you know, those investors and what's unique to those investors. And I'll tell you, I've just sat on about 15 calls in the last 2 months. It's all the same thing. They want to know, what are you doing to impact the carbon footprint at the hotel level? And then what are you doing to improve, you know, diversity, representation, and everything that goes along your culture in your organization.
Got it.
You know, one of the things what's interesting, and I was just trying to look up the data. I won't have time during this call, but you know, one of the areas, I'm curious to know if how surprised this catches you, Patrick. But we asked a question recently of HR leaders about the effectiveness of their HR teams when it comes to knowing how investors value their firm. And the percentage of respondents that said highly effective was not strong. And, you know, but this, you know, the way investors, to your point, are valuing a firm has changed dramatically in the last few years in particular. And it seems like that's just going to continue going on. You know, how are you seeing that change, or, you know, how would you respond to what I just shared?
You know, Kevin, I'll tell you when the light bulb went on for me, beyond the ESG efforts. The light bulb went on for me when we announced, we were talking about this before, our transition internally of our CEO. The light bulb went on for me when I thought about the top 3 or 4 investors in our organization. Investors generally like predictability and they like consistency. Okay, so the light bulb for me was, wow, this whole idea of succession planning is actually really important from an investor standpoint. For me, it was at the top of the hill, right? The CEO, but it's for everything. You know, as I think about myself, the next HR executive is going to be important because, you know, I've said to you privately this, our investors care about our balance sheet and our talent sheet. And the HR executive's responsibility is to improve the talent sheet. So that's critical. And that's where the light bulb went on for me, is when that transition happened, you saw this almost calmness, right, amongst investors. And HR is right in the middle of that. You know, you have a direct responsibility for it. And boards want to know that you can manage through that.
You know what, this might be a great time to just explore something we were talking about before we let everyone in on this, Patrick. You know, it's just having had a chance, you know, I've been with our firm for just over 9 years, but in that 9 years, I've had the good fortune of seeing you interface directly with Steve Joyce, your previous CEO, Pat Pacious, your current CEO. And what's always struck me is, you know, just that everything, the way I always viewed it was they just view you as a partner. I mean, you are their partner. I mean, it's just the banter between you was just so impressive. And, so we wanted to explore with you, part about, how did you start your relationships with those CEOs? How have they evolved over time as Choice's business has evolved? And then, we could take that into, we'd love to know, how has your business and work model evolved, even as a result of the pandemic as well and going forward? But if you could talk about that CEO relationship first, please.
Sure. I wish that Jay Jamron was on this call, because I would tell him that I owe him a coffee or whatever his wish is, because I never thought when I became the HR executive for this company how important culture would be. For every CEO now, for me, I'm on my fifth one. The culture is so critical. And you are, as the HR executive, you're kind of the keeper of the keys. The CEO influences it the most, but you are the person that has to navigate through the multitude of challenges you have with your culture. So starting with that is understanding where their key decision factors are around culture for each CEO. So the non-negotiables. And so as we transitioned from Steve, and Steve was, I'll never forget this. I've told this story publicly. I'll never forget. I asked him one day when I first was promoted what his expectations were of me. And he said, well, the first thing is I need you to be fun. And I remember going home telling my wife that night about those expectations. She said, well, you're not going to last very long in this job. And so, because I'm not fun, I'm an introvert by nature. But then what I learned over the years was fun is not balloons and candy. It's about creating meaningful work together where we accomplish something together. And when you walk home or you drive home at night, you think, you know what, that was a lot of fun, because we did something with some great people, and the organization did it together. And as Pat came on, what I realized is this, and wow, we really learned it during the pandemic, how important culture is to a CEO. They need to know, what do people feel? What do they think? How do we want to treat them? How do we want to communicate with them? That's really important. So creating a cadence with those CEOs around those things that drive and impact culture, mission critical. I start my one-on-one. I have a one-on-one with Pat every other week. We start that conversation with the same thing every meeting. We talk about the different elements of culture, and a lot of it's the stuff I learned from Jay Jamron a long time ago. And so those things are critical.
Yeah,
Well, we'll let him know you called him out for sure. We'll let him know. We'll let him know we got a shout out. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, for those who don't know Jay is the co-founder of I4CP, and he is our futurist as well. So that's awesome. Carrie, anything you wanted to jump in here with?
Yeah, just in terms of those culture conversations, how, and given that, your organization is set up as a franchise organization, how do you keep a kind of a finger on the pulse of what's happening? What are the mechanisms that you're using to be able to gather that information regularly?
Sure. So, one of the things that's evolved in the world of HR is technology. So we're a Workday shop. So you have pulse surveys, and we utilize that quite often. We do cultural assessments. This past year, we did, Carrie, do the Dennison survey, and that was different, and it was very helpful. That really helped me understand the way our culture interacts with our customers, largely our franchisees. And so that was very helpful. We also do engagement surveys, just like other companies. And we do a lot of just talking to our employees with being virtual, a lot of Zoom calls, fireside chats, just really listening to people. I think the greatest thing, there's a couple things I've learned in the last 2 years around culture. One is words matter, the language that we use. So if I were to write a book as an HR executive, I'd first start with language, the words that you use publicly, privately. People hang on to those things. CEOs, helping CEOs understand that the words that they use, the impact that they have. In a time of the pandemic, I can't tell you how many times people hung on to every word that Pat and I would say. And so we would rehearse those things together. And we would challenge the definition of words. I thought I was back in grammar school. But the fact of the matter is that is absolutely critical. People remember the first and the last thing you say, and they remember the words that you use. That helps evolve a culture. For us, that key word is around relationships. And for me, it's about, really empathy. People need to know that you're empathetic, that you can understand what they're going through. And more importantly, you can put yourself in their shoes. It's the thing you learn at your mother's knee, right? Which is listen first, and be respectful for people, because everybody's going through something. Kevin said something to me yesterday. I was telling my wife about it. It's someone that tells you they're doing great right now. You got to call BS on that, man. Nobody's doing great right now. Everybody's got something happen, especially particularly the last few weeks, right? And you think about the fact that it's just ever changing and evolving. We got to be sensitive to that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Sorry, Kevin, I just want to two things. One is one of the sayings in our household is words are a horrible way to communicate. And so the fact that you spend, because they're just so easily misunderstood, like one word to one person means something so different to somebody else. So I love the fact that you actually almost workshop the words that you're going to use to make sure that they're landing the way you want them to land. I've never talked to anybody else who's done that before. And it's to your point, it's so important because it's just things can be misconstrued, and especially in times of stress. So that is very interesting, and I'm guessing pretty impactful in terms of your ultimate message that you send.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then we had asked you for a quote or a saying, and the thing that you did share with us is leading with empathy. So I know you've kind of started talking about that, but maybe you could just expand on that a bit and how you do that.
Look, this is not new. I'm sure there's lots of things written about this, but the thing that was most reticent for me in the last 2 years is the amount of times you'd have a conversation, whether it's on Zoom in this sort of one-way conversation, or even on having a conversation on your cell phone with someone, about just listening and giving people time to tell you about what they're going through. Whether it's having an issue with childcare, or I was talking to Kevin about the importance of understanding the value proposition for parents, but really what it is it's really caregivers. And I think Kevin corrected me on that. And he's right. It's really about caregivers, because it's not just working parents with children, but it's, we all have something going on with our parents too at some time. And the number of people that have something happening with one of their parents, and then that you just need the flexibility to take mom or dad to the doctor or go visit them in, Ohio or wherever it might be, critical. And, I find myself now spending more time teaching people how to be empathetic. That sounds funny, I know that, but it's serious, and you think about people that are, I'm going to use the phrase young in career, okay? I think that it's tough to mix this idea of empathy and leadership, but it's critical. You right now, particularly in this world that people have choices, they call it the great resignation, which I don't necessarily like those words, but it is what it is. People want to know you care about them. And the only way to do that is, like my grandfather used to tell me, speak with your action, not your words. And so you got to go do, not say. And so, whether that's, hey, I need every Friday to take mom or dad to the doctor, or, hey, man, I need to be able to cut out at 2 o'clock because I don't have daycare. And so if you're okay, can I log back on at 8 o'clock? And you'd be surprised the number of people that are just uncomfortable with that. And I spend a lot of time, as do my HR leaders, with that topic. And it's so critical. I think people value that more than they do a paycheck. They still value a paycheck. I get it. Particularly when you can make $20,000 working down the street for the same job. But man, you got to find those differentiators. And the differentiator is really about being empathetic. They want to know they have a boss that actually cares about them as a human being. That to me is mission critical.
Well, and it goes back to, people don't leave their company, they leave their manager, their direct manager typically. And so if you have a group of managers, leaders that are leading with empathy, to your point, and people do know that they are cared about, that's going to go a long way to somebody's decision to stay or leave.
Yeah, look, I've got the brand here because you can never miss an opportunity for marketing. But look, people, you're right. People work for people, people quit people. And generally in my 30 years of doing HR, I've seen that. Now, you're right. There's the rare occasion. There's a step up. But, look, they'll never forget, either if you work for Choice for 20 years, you work for 2, if they have a positive experience, they're going to tell somebody about our company. So I look at it that way, which is, let's make it the best experience possible for them during the period that they're here, because eventually they may refer somebody else. And so if it's about the person they work for, I mean, with LinkedIn today, I mean, people are looking for that manager. How do I go work for her? Because I know she's going to actually help me with my children, my parents, or whatever, my spouse, my significant other, my partner, whatever it might be. They're going to understand what I'm going through. That's critical. I have an employee right now who works in my own organization who his partner died suddenly. And, you know, I know that that guy likes to cook. He can't cook right now, so we send him food. And you know what? I know that means more to him than anything in the world. So, you know, knowing, you know, we talk about these re-enrollment conversations. The amount of times that Stephanie Likens is someone I work with here for 20 years, when we talk about the key elements to a re-enrollment conversation. And one of them is, what do you care about? You know, like what's that thing that's most important to you? You'd be surprised what those answers could be. And you have to manage to that.
And by re-enrollment, are you kind of talking like reboarding, like ensuring that people continue to be engaged, just so that we're
yeah. So it's really this, you know, every 6 months you have to re-enroll people as to why they work for Choice and why do they work for you and your department.
Gotcha.
I think more than ever, leaders have to have those re-enrollment conversations because people are changing their mind every 3 months, and I think that's critical.
Carrie and Patrick, I want to jump in here. We have a couple of questions from the audience that I want to make sure we get to Patrick. Alex, let's tee up in just a moment the poll question so that we can get that out. And then after we go into the audience question, we discuss the poll question, Patrick, I think it'd be good for us to kind of transition the conversation around flexibility and mobility, because you know, there's some rich stuff here that I think the audience would find of value. So first off, a couple of questions from the audience. We have one from Naomi. What are some ways you have helped leaders early in career see how empathy works?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Naomi. So I would say for me personally, it's you have to think about those moments of truth, right? And creating an environment in a coaching environment where people feel free to talk to you about what they're struggling with as a leader. And I think we've done some of that. We're not perfect at it. We've got to continue to get better. But I would say that moment of truth is when that employee is going through something major, and it happens all the time, whether it's, you know, a loved one who's sick, or a child who got COVID, or let's say someone had passed away. You know, it's helping that leader understand how to manage through that. And I can tell you the number of calls that I get, or my other HR executives around, what do I do? And it always starts with that. What do I do? And you always start with one, listen. Call the person and listen. What are their needs? So how do you do a needs assessment of somebody? You ask them. You have to determine pretty quickly if there's something serious. Like right now, one of the things I'm very concerned about is people being alone and, you know, not taking care of themselves, whether it's physical, mental, financial. We've got an array of things that we offer people. You can't be afraid to say to somebody, hey, we've got this EAP hotline. Here's the number. I want you to call and tell me how it goes. If you're comfortable. You know, those are the things that we do. I'm sure that's not new to anybody, but you know, you got to kind of repeat it. It's like they tell you if you really want to get good at golf, you have to hit 1,000 golf balls like every week or every month or whatever it is. You know, this is one of those things you got to do it a lot. You can't just do it once and forget about it, put it on the shelf. You have to do it all the time.
Malcolm Gladwell said 10,000 repetitions creates that expertise or something. Yeah,
it makes sense.
The other questions from Bruno, Patrick, and he was really alluding to something we, you know, all of us are so familiar with, and our research clearly shows that, you know, a change-ready culture is absolutely essential to be a high-performance organization. And where leaders embrace change, it makes all the difference versus leaders that don't. And easier said than done, but what Bruno's talking about is with all the change, people are exhausted from change. But you know, change is constant, and there's always things new that companies need to take on or adapt to. You know, how to think about change right now, or how are you helping your workforce think about change as well?
Yeah, so I think it starts at the top. You know, I'm going to use a word that probably we could spend some time talking about. I think the first one is with our leaders is allowing people to be vulnerable, you know, helping people through this vulnerability opportunity they have. I think people want to know, this is just Patrick, just speaking on my own behalf. People want to know that you yourself are vulnerable. Allowing people to have a sort of a window into you as a leader, whether you're an executive or you're on the line, doesn't matter, is that you're vulnerable too, that you're going through something as well. It helps people understand that we're all in this together and we're all kind of going through it, and it's not stopping. Second thing is, I think, at the line level is helping people, really create that environment where it's safe. I never would have thought in my career that this idea of safety would be so critical. So think about it. A couple of years ago, we were all talking about assailant training. This idea of, what if a gunman had come into your workforce, or now the pandemic. And I've spent so much time. I think I could be what's that person called? Epidemiologist. I think I could get pretty close to it. But really what it comes down to is our employees want to know that I know enough to keep them safe. Okay. And I get that. And I think it's important that we translate that to the workforce. So vulnerability and safety, to me, are the two most important things that you can hit the repetition button on. So at the leadership level, vulnerability; at the employee level, helping people feel comfortable with working, whether that's at home, whether it's in Alaska, or whether it's in your office. This idea of safety, mission critical.
Got it. Great. All right. Well, let's kick off the poll question. And Patrick, this is, you had asked us to put together a question here. You want to, as people look at this, so please make sure that you go to your nav bar, you click on poll or so if you need to pull it up, and click away. And this is we have a single choice here. Oh, interesting. This was supposed to be multiple choice because people are doing a lot of things. But you know what we'll ask is, what do you think is the most unique and effective thing you're offering? And if it's other, which we totally want to hear others as well, we ask that you feel comfortable coming off mute. But Patrick, why was this question so important to you to ask?
Yeah, so as I think about 2022 and likely beyond sort of our 4 pillars of our HR strategy, I think, to me, I think employee well-being is probably critical. You think about the employee experience, it's really surrounded around well-being. I mentioned financial, physical, mental, but I also think that there are these opportunities to create value proposition moments, whether it's for caregivers, as we mentioned, or people who are alone. I mean, there's so many people that are literally just alone, whether they're just out of college and they're sitting in that apartment in a city where they can't get out right now, or there are individual contributors sitting in a state that's nowhere near the office. This idea of what's important to people. So for me, caregivers right now, what's that one thing, what's that differentiator that you're doing? And to your point, I'm sure there's a lot of things people are doing, but I'm always just curious I'd like to know what other people are doing.
Awesome. Alex, do you, I see the question. Can you bring up the results? See where just the audience, those who wanted to respond, what do we have here? All right. Patrick, can you see this?
I do, yeah.
All right. So I want to hold off on my reaction for a moment here. I'd like to get your reaction to this.
Yeah, it's not surprising, but I'll tell you, we were talking about this yesterday. Making sure this is at the top of the agenda for executives to understand, and I say executives, really your C-suite executives and your CEO, that's so critical. We do the same thing in our pulse surveys, and you get the same response. And I think look, I'm guessing here, it's for a variety of reasons. One of them, it could be other things we talked about. It's just that, hey, I've got all these things happening in my life, and I could be so much more productive if I have a flexible environment. Or it could be, I never want to get in a car again because that's 2 hours of my life I'm not getting back. And I'm not giving that up. Okay. I mean, both are important. And so to me, this just reiterates the importance of this idea of flexibility. And we talked about how words matter. That's a really important word right now.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Carrie, how about you? Any thoughts?
Well, just the flexibility piece. I think that, we just closed a study. We're literally in the throes of writing it up, and it's all about hybrid work and what hybrid work actually means and what it doesn't mean. And that word flexibility is clearly front and center, and that does not mean the same thing to everybody, right? And so that is, it's very on point to our current discussions.
I see this comment. I think I read it. Whoever wrote that is absolutely right. They have to model that behavior as a leader. You've got to make it people feel safe. That's why on Fridays and Mondays, I generally work from home because I don't want my team to feel like, well, he's going in 5 days a week, I have to go in 5 days a week. And you are absolutely right, whoever said that. And I forced our CEO to work from home a couple of days a week just so that he doesn't send the wrong message. And I think he's gotten better at it. But that is absolutely right. You got to start that behavior at the top.
You know, it's just anecdotally, I was watching CNBC Squawk Box this morning, and they were having a debate, and one of the panelists was saying, they were talking about how the reality of the world is, and they were specifically talking about the financial centers, is that bonuses are year-end bonuses are very subjective, and they're always going to go weight higher on that leader who was in the office working on a deadline to get something done to close a major deal, and that person sitting right next to them was there working the wee hours with them. They may have had a teammate who was over in Dubai who was virtually working and doing the same amount of work, same amount of hours, but that leader felt like, you know what, you were here with me and this, and that's just the way it's always going to be. I mean, I just sat there and I chuckled saying, this is such a mindset shift for leaders, and then, you know, the talent processes and supportive mechanisms that need to support it. Because Patrick, you know, we're going to talk about flexibility here in just a minute, but you can say you're offering flexibility all you want, but at the end of the day, if leaders are still going to dole out bonuses because, you know what, you were there with me, you know, sitting by my side, and you're getting a bigger bonus as a result of that, I can't see where that's good.
Well, a few minutes ago, you asked me this question around sort of that relationship between the HR executive and the CEO. And I think it starts in those companies. Most HR executives right now, you're sitting with the CEO and you're helping he or she evaluate the other executives. I mean, that's a really important role. I mean, you're evaluating that discretionary portion of their short-term incentive. And this just happened the other day. We were talking about something, and I said, always remember something we've always said: we will not have performance at the sake of our culture. Okay. And I think flexibility is part of that right now. There's multiple things that are part of that cultural attributes, but you cannot have performance at the sake of your culture. And I think what you just said is one of those items. And you have to be able to look that CEO in the face and say, hey, is that really what you want? Because that's what you're doing here if you do that. Okay. And you have to call them on it. And, you know, I will tell you, there have been some moments where I've gotten nervous when I've done that, but you know what? It's my job. And so, you know, it is something that I struggle with, but you have to do it. And I've gotten more comfortable over 15 years, but you know, you got to do it. And I saw the question about why parents, and it's a really good one. You know, a couple of my direct reports remind me of that quite often. It's just an element of the workforce. You know, there are multiple elements. There's also caregivers, whether you have parents. You're right. You can't look at just one element. It's just something that right now is very topical here at Choice.
Yeah, I would also say, Faye, you know, we pulled that question from a survey we did over the summer, and the survey was specific to, it was titled Keeping Women in the Workplace. And it was all about addressing, you know, one of the major reasons that all research is pointing towards of, you know, how in many instances, or the majority of instances, women in the families are, you know, or single families are primary caregivers in that regard. So that's where we took that question from as well. Not suggesting anything you put in your comment is not something that we're avoiding by any means. Hey, Patrick, can you talk, you know, one of the things that we've been talking about, Carrie and I and others on the research team, is how, you know, for most companies right now, the notion of flexibility is widespread formalized flexibility is still very new. But where they're discussing things is really around hours worked, location of work, and then the number of hours worked. Let's say so the number, the actual when, the where, et cetera. But one of the things we've talked about, and we've been seeing this pop up in our research quite a bit, is that it also needs to encompass, don't ever overlook the variability or the variable of movement, of variety in the type of work and experiences that people have an opportunity to be a part of, et cetera. And you all have, for the last few years, you built a project called Project Mobility. Can you talk about that a little bit and where you see that really taking on critical importance, even more so going forward?
Sure. So Project Mobility was born out of an idea that one of the folks that works for me, that she and I both had in our career, and it's really around stretch assignments. And so I remember back many moons ago when I was in my 20s working somewhere else, and someone asked me, hey, would you mind staying a couple hours a week after hours, and we'll teach you how to do stock comp plan administration. So I did that. And this other individual had done something similar. And we started talking about this idea of stretch assignments. How do we create stretch opportunities for people at Choice and make it a win-win? So you have to sell it to managers so that if Sally or John are going to come out of their job and do something a couple hours a week or day, that how do they both win in this? And so really for us, it was around creating a stretch assignment for somebody where they can really learn and grow, learn something new, stretch themselves, maybe experience a different department, a different function, maybe learn a new skill. And then this idea for the manager is like, listen, you're making an investment in the employee. Again, people work for people. Well, if you go ahead and make that investment in them, they're going to be very loyal eventually, maybe not to you, the person, and maybe the company, they'll go do something different. And so where that really came into play was during the pandemic. We needed a call to action to get people to come out of their day jobs to do things like, I don't know, calling franchisees to help them with, how do they help them avoid bankruptcy, or maybe payment plans, or helping them with anything. So we had a number of people that did different jobs during the pandemic, and we did it through Project Mobility that really allowed people to get on the front line. And I got to tell you, it was a great experience. I saw a lot of people thrive. People felt like they were doing something meaningful for themselves. And it also stretched them a little bit, and it gave them purpose during a time where we all need to have one purpose and one mission. And that was help our franchisees survive in a very difficult time. And that's how we use it. And I'll tell you, I've seen a lot of people move in the organization through Project Mobility. I've seen people really thrive in that environment.
And Project Mobility, Patrick, is it voluntary? And what's required? I think it's 2 hours a day that someone spends. And how long does that project last? Can you talk about that?
Sure. So the simple answer, it varies, right? So, but most of the time it's a volunteer experience, but sometimes it's, hey, we know this person that has said that they want to do something different, and we'll offer a Project Mobility experience to them. Usually, Kevin, it's a couple hours a day. Sometimes it could be in addition to their workday. It could be supplemented. It could be augmented. Just depends. It ranges in anywhere between very minimum 8 weeks, but sometimes it could go as long as 12. It could go as far as 6 months if there's a duration that's longer for that particular project. I would say on average, though, 8 to 12 weeks is about sort of the center of the fairway, and a couple hours a day.
And what are the benefits to the manager that's giving up someone a couple hours a day? How are you selling that to the manager, and what have they noticed as a result as well?
Yeah, so look, I like to measure something called failure rate, okay? And failure rate for us is simply, what percentage of your workforce are you getting beyond 3 years? We set our failure rate at 3 years, Kevin, okay? I'm sure that's somewhat subjective, but we set it at 3 years. And so the sell to the manager is, listen, if we can get an employee to stay 3 years or more, and we're winning, okay? Anything beyond that's great for the company, great for the employee. So it helps that employee know that you're making an investment in them, and it helps get to that 3 year mark. So hopefully in 3 years, they do something else at Choice, maybe within the department, but it's really helping drive down our failure rate. And that's, for the manager, I would hope they see that as a win-win.
That makes total sense. And I see something here from Kurt in the audience. Can you talk, Patrick, again, knowing about joint employer, laws, et cetera, but what are some ways that you're exploring coaching your franchisees on how to offer flexibility to hotel staff?
Those who need to be on site, right? Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Those who need to be on site, actually.
Yeah. So at the hotel level. So I know a couple of things that we are coaching them through. One is this idea of around flexibility. So think about housekeepers. Think traditionally when housekeepers work versus maybe there's a way for housekeepers to work at night. Again, you offer different suggestions. We can't tell them what to do. Or think about what you do when you check into a hotel. How you influence guests. Do you really need to have your room changed every day? Do you need towel service every day? All that has an impact on labor, and then ultimately how you sort of work with your workforce around when they work. I think also different work streams or talent pools. Sorry, talent pools. I'm going to say talent pools, not work streams. But we always go after the same talent pools. Are there alternate talent pools out there? Think about people with disabilities. There are lots of different opportunities that we can offer people in the workforce, and helping our franchisees or owners know that there are alternate workforces out there. We do that through Choice University, and it's a relationship that we have internally with HR and within Choice University. Lots of different ways to do that, working with our owners. It's a challenge. So it's a challenge every day. It's the biggest challenge our owners have right now is the labor market. But flexibility is one of those things in labor pools, is helping them understand those different things.
That's great. And Patrick, can we talk a little bit about when you think about the corporate, since you've got 95% of your, or 90% or so of your overall employees are really the employees of the franchisee, but for the 10% of your overall workforce that's corporate to Choice, can you talk about changes to any work models that you've adopted or you'll be adopting going forward, and what that looks like?
Yeah, so we come up with a program that we call Working Together. We haven't launched it yet because of Omicron, but Working Together is we were talking about this yesterday, Kevin, right? We've got to come up with a new word for hybrid, and we came up with Working Together. And so Working Together at Choice, there's really there's three types of employees, right? You've got remote, someone that we've said, hey, about 20%, Kevin, of our workforce is completely remote now. We have people that are field employees. They've always been in there. Those are people that are out selling, marketing, working with their hotels. They've always been working somewhere else in the country. And then we have, I think everybody else by default is hybrid, okay? So Working Together is this idea that if we're gonna have people come in, let's say we're shooting for 2 to 3 days a week. That's what we're aiming for. We thought, okay, a couple of things. One is, I believe if you're going to have people come in, one, it better be meaningful. Okay, so create those magnet opportunities, right, for people. So whether it's, we talked about how do we reinstitute fun back in the workplace. Not sure what that looks like yet, but working through that. But meaningful connections, right? So if you're going to have people come in, and for us, we're going to use Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. If we're going to do that, then man, we better make it meaningful for them. So let's not have people sitting in their cubicles or their offices the entire time. So maybe that's when you have your staff meetings. Maybe that's when you have your collaboration opportunities. Maybe that's when you focus on innovation. I don't want to say that you can't innovate at home. You can, but how do you think about innovation, creativity in the workplace? But make sure that if you're going to have people coming in, you create meaningful opportunities while they're there. Because if not, your employees are going to go, well, why'd you make me come in then? I could have done this at home. And so that's important. It's not, you don't want to create this environment where people think it's, well, they're just trying to measure butts and seats. That's not what we want to do. Meaningful work, meaningful opportunities, creative connections. I think that's important. I can't really read this question, but connecting culture and flexibility. What was the question, Karen?
Oh, sorry, it's connecting culture. Sorry, Kevin. Connecting culture and flexibility. Share more about your approach on keeping the culture when more people are now working together differently.
Yeah, so that's really a tough one, right? Because culture is important, but how do you maintain culture when people are all everywhere, whether they're working hybrid, whether they're working remote, they're in the field? I think it's about, again, the moments that you are together. Think about whether it's like yesterday we had an all associates virtual meeting with the CEO, but it's really about what are you focused on? So we talked a lot about our guests. We talk a lot about our owners. So creating, this back to the Dennison survey, people want to know how they connect customer. So, really connecting the customer to our employees right now, regardless of where they are. If they're in the office, or when they're in the office, they're not here right now, but when they're in the office, what are they focused on that are our cultural attributes? So for us, it's around innovation, it's around collaboration, sense of urgency, inclusion, making sure you're doing those things at the moments that count, so that whether they're here, they're at home, you're really focused on your cultural attributes. It's a lot harder, I will admit, it's a lot harder when everyone's remote. It is difficult, but again, words matter. The words that you use, how you communicate. I think about the pandemic, the one thing that I look back and said, what was critical? It was the cadence at which we communicated with people. We created a very intentional cadence around communication.
So we're what do you think is most important to share with your peers, whether it's a call to action, whether it's something that's top of mind for you? If you could tap into your head as an outside in or an outsider, what would you want to share that you think they'd find most valuable?
I think what I'd want to know if I was in a virtual room of my peers, if you will, is what can we do to enhance the experience of our employees now and into the future? And whether those are programs, initiatives, ideas, to me, it's about making work more meaningful for people in a time where they've got just a multitude of challenges in front of them. But also, it's around improving the talent sheet for our organization. So we've got this sort of mixed mission as an HR executive. We've got to help deliver value to the shareholders, but we also have to deliver value to our employees. And so what are those critical things that you're thinking about, and how are you getting through them? For me right now, there are 4 pillars to our talent strategy. Talent management and acquisition doesn't go away. You got to be able to hire people. You got to be able to think about succession pipeline. You got to think about diversity and inclusion, your roadmap to representation, how you reward people. And that's so unique right now, that 3rd pillar. People, you talked about bonuses, but there are so many other things. Whether those are well-being days, we instituted well-being days here about 1.5 years ago. People can take an unlimited amount of time off to just take care of themselves. And we don't track it. Well, we track it just to see if it's working, but we don't care how many days you take off. And it doesn't impact your vacation or your sick time. And then the employee experience, that 4th pillar. What are we doing to impact the employee experience? And a part of that employee experience, we talked about it, people working for people, is how do we create an environment where our managers can thrive too? I was thinking about having a fireside chat with Patrick here in the upcoming weeks with all of our managers in the company, and really just having an open forum around, hey, what do you want to know around how to manage through this? Because we've got this catalog of ideas, but how do I get that out in this virtual environment?
That's great. Well, Patrick, you've been an outstanding guest. I mean, we really appreciate everything that you've shared. Choices. You had mentioned to us beforehand, you were the last hotel company to do a layoff after the pandemic set in. Clearly, you guys are doing so many right things, and we just appreciate you sharing as well. Carrie, let's round this out to give our guests a couple minutes before their top of the hour meetings or whatnot. But anything you want to close with, Carrie? Any closing thoughts on your end?
I just thank you, Patrick. I think I wrote down a lot of catchphrases almost that we could sort of be learning from. Words matter. Working together, I love that too, and sort of the multiple meanings there. I don't know, they're all over my notebook. So great food for thought for us as well as a research firm, and very impressed with everything you're doing. It just sounds like certainly nobody has it all figured out, but you are showing your vulnerability and that you don't necessarily, and asking the right questions. So, and kind of continuing down the track and making sure everybody's doing as well as they possibly can in this environment. So thank you for role modeling that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll close with this, folks. And I just put this in the chat. Our priorities, our 2022 priorities and predictions report is available. We're making that available to everyone. Here's what's unique about it. First off, what's unique is that the priorities in it are gathered. We had over 100 people who serve on our various boards, like our Chief HR Officer board that Patrick was on for years. They answer questions for us at the end of the year. They're writing questions. We simply ask them, what are your top priorities for the coming year? And we look at all of them from all of our boards, total rewards, talent acquisition, chief learning and talent, you name it. And we look and say, these are their priorities. So this will give you a cross-functional look from your peers as to where their focus areas are for the year ahead. We also put forth 4 predictions as a research firm, and we also include predictions from 3 thought leaders: an academic, John Bedreau, a Thinkers 50 management guru, Sanyan Sang from Duke Fuqua School, and also Lisa Shallett, who oversees Extraordinary Women on Boards, giving you the board level perspective. And we're just very hopeful that it provides you a lot of good thinking as well for the coming year. So it's yours to download. Again, Patrick, thank you to you. Congratulations with everything with your family and with you and with Choice Hotels. Carrie, thanks for your awesome partnership as always. And Alex, you too. And we'll see everyone next month when we get together for this next same call.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Patrick.
Cheers, everyone.
Thanks, Kevin. Bye.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.